Welcome. How's everybody doing? 4:30 on Monday. How many of you first reInvent? So good to see all of you here. So many friends are here in the audience. Thanks for making time for our session today. Thanks for choosing to be here at this session. And for those that are watching online or at home or the recording, available 24 hours after today, we appreciate you making the time to be here. And I promise you're all going to walk away with knowing a lot more about what we do in the industry, but also you're going to hear a great story about a 100-year-old plus company breaking into two new companies and then becoming really digital native. So I'm excited for where we're headed today. I'm going to open this up with about 7 to 10 minutes or so, giving you a sense for how we approach the industry in retail and consumer goods. And then I'm going to hand it over to Ramesh to talk about what's happening at Kellanova, and then Bill, who's going to take it around what we're doing with WK Kellogg. Sound good? And then we will have time for questions at the end. We've got a mic here. We'll come around and we'll take those questions. All right, so let's dive in. So over the last 18 to 24 months, we actually shifted to a real focus around the industry here at AWS. And for us, retail and consumer goods are together under one industry vertical, if you want to think of it that way. And so what that means is as our teams are working with customers in these industries, they're getting people who know the industry. Amazing, right? The sales teams, Alex here manages the relationship with Kellanova and WK Kellogg, and he knows consumer goods. He's been around it now 7, 8, 10 years. The business development team that works with him came out of the industry. The solution architects know the industry. Our partners know the industry. Some are here in the room, right? And so that's a really big deal. When we go have a conversation with a customer around things like trade promotion management or revenue growth management or price pack planning or some of the products you see here and the channels that they go into, right? It's nice to be able to speak the same language. And so we really put a big focus around that as you think about consumer goods and retail. In consumer goods, which we're going to spend most of our time on today, I'd like to say that we help customers like Kellanova and WK Kellogg build great brands that consumers love, right? We're really good at that. We do that with the vast majority of CPG brands in the world. And on the retail side, we like to say we're born from retail. So AWS was established in, anybody not an AWS person, answer? 2000 and nobody knows. 2006? Someone watching online knows. 2006, right? And that's the platform on which Amazon.com was built, right? And for 6 or 7 years, there was nobody else in the cloud space. And so it really gave us a big head start from everything from partners as well as solutions. And so on the retail side, in addition to kind of leveraging what we learned from retail, we also are really good at things like frictionless commerce and composable commerce, big priorities right now for retailers, as well as the operations side of things. So that's kind of how we think about consumer goods and retail. And we really are focused on just being really focused on you, the customer, right? Just give you a sense. Now, most CPG brands, most consumer goods brands work with many parts of Amazon, or multiple parts of Amazon, I should say. Many have their products, like the ones you see here on the stage, on Amazon.com. They're selling through retail as a sales channel, right? Most work with us at AWS in some form or fashion. Most are leveraging Amazon advertising. Most also leverage Amazon Business for purchasing, for procurement and sourcing, or to sell products through that sales channel. Most consumer goods brands work with 6, 7, or 8 different parts of Amazon, all of which operate independently. So it's interesting the relationship we have with a brand because we need to come at the customer-minded first, but also help them to connect the dots across. And as you think about things like retail solutions or supply chain, digital manufacturing, how we do our commercial execution, we enable that at AWS, but also most consumer goods brands can leverage different parts of Amazon to progress how they serve a customer. So a little bit about how we're organized. Now, as we come into the fourth quarter of this year, these are some of the big topics that are front and center. And most of you, if you work with consumer goods manufacturers, these topics should not be strange or unusual. I will say the generative AI topic, which was the topic for the last 18 to 24 months, is still there. It's still something that most of our brands are very interested in, but now we're starting to see it actually becoming part of many of the other areas you see on this stage or on this screen here. So as it relates to connected factory and digital manufacturing, as it relates to supply chain, inventory visibility and forecasting, as it relates to price pack planning, consumer and shopper insights, and digital core, which you're going to hear today about, and typically in CPG, that is with SAP. All right, so you came here to hear about Kellogg's, Kellanova and WK Kellogg. A little bit of history. I'm going to do a little setup for you. Kellogg's, over 1,000 products. This is the company before breaking into two businesses in 180 countries. Okay, so the thing I want you to take away from here is, first of all, the complexity around number of products, number of product types. Look here, all these different types. Number of flavors. There's actually a Pringles flavor in the UK called prawn cocktail. It's shrimp cocktail flavor. I cannot imagine that being a popular seller here in Las Vegas. But when I said that a couple weeks ago in the UK, I got a lot of people saying that is our favorite brand. So, but right product, right place, right format, right location. So that's a complexity if you think about products. And selling into different countries, the way you think about route to market and delivery and distribution, complex, right? Requires different types of technology behind the scenes, and a partner, by the way, who operates in many of those locations. Also, this company was established in 1906. So when AWS was established in 2006, it's 100 years later. Crazy to think about that, right? Okay, and when I looked at the numbers the other day before I was preparing for this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But here's what's interesting. So you know many of the brands here that have been incubated and launched from legacy Kellogg's. A couple things I'll highlight though. In addition to developing their own brands, there's been a number of acquisitions, right? So Keebler, Pringles, Kashi, you see on the bottom there. With that, what comes with that? When you buy a company, you also acquire their technical debt, right? Complexity, legacy systems, the things that you may or may not evolved from that existing platform to a new platform, a lot of different types of data, different types of shoppers and consumers. And so as we get into the second part or third part of our presentation today, I think the thing I want you to think about is just think about some of these complex elements that come into the story that is today. So 1,000 products, 180 countries, number of acquisitions, legacy technical debt, systems that weren't talking to one another, analytics. Can you imagine trying to do analytics and reporting without using just Excel, right? And let alone generative AI, right? So all these things come together to be part of our story today. And my last slide before I hand it over to Ramesh is just to show you that this relationship here has been something that has evolved over nearly 10 years. Right, and I mean, I think back when I first joined, it was actually the first customer that I had the opportunity to work with, and initially it was all around trade promotion management. Like that's where this relationship started. It evolved into the SAP landscape and SAP space. For those of you that are interested in that transformation, you're going to hear all about that shortly. And then today, we're at a place where we're the platform for integrated data and analytics, master data governance, really enabling a lot of the line of business capabilities that are at the heart of Kellanova and WK Kellogg. Now, just as a reminder, Kellanova is the snack business, WK Kellogg is the cereal business. Good? Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ramesh to come talk about Kellanova, and then keep your questions. We're going to do Q&A at the end. So I will hand it over to Ramesh. Let's give Ramesh a round of applause.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here on the AWS stage. What an incredible event this is. I started my year with the biggest conference in technology in Saudi Arabia, and I'm actually finishing off with the best tech conference here in Vegas. A little bit about myself. I'm the global CTO for Kellanova. I had the opportunity to work and live across all 3 continents in the globe. I always had the opportunity to work in the intersection of consumer and technology. And I believe this is the most exciting space, both in the corporate world and also outside of corporate world. Technology has a huge role. Within the corporate world, I do see technology can unlock the potential for all the companies across the globe. Outside, in the broader societies, I do believe technology has the unique power to make the society a lot more inclusive and equitable. Okay, so here is the biggest moment that Justin has called out. So this is when Kellanova has formed. Back in 2022, July, we have announced splitting or separating the company of Kellogg into Kellanova, a global snack-led powerhouse that I represent. And a North America cereal-based company that is WKK, which my ex-colleague Bill is going to share more insights into. Okay, so I directly jumped into the end of Kellanova, but let me actually give you a little bit more insights about the company and how we got here. So Justin has kindly brought some of the products that we actually market across the globe. So I'm sure we have the privilege to be across your homes and across all the homes in the globe with our brands like Cheez-It, Pringles, Pop-Tarts and all. Just to give you some information, our Pringles is a 3+ billion brand. And Cheez-It is a 1.2 billion brand. And how did we really reach out to this place? I want to first take you to the journey that we started probably somewhere around 7 years back. These are probably, I'll call it as a sort of success for IT and digital at Kellanova or Kellogg at that time. Roughly around 7 years back, we actually conceptualized our cloud strategy. So around that time, I'm sure everyone across probably the industry were thinking about cloud. So similar to all other companies, we started with the cloud strategy, but more importantly, we started with our guiding principles. So that is cloud-first approach, migrate-first approach. So migrate first, optimize later. Cloud brings all the benefits you're all very familiar. So starting with scale, agility, and more importantly, efficiencies. When I say efficiencies, it's not just cost efficiency. It's the focus time of the IT team to focus on the things that really matter, that really add value to the business, not on probably the things that are really common across any company. And when we did this, let me emphasize how we have actually achieved this. So started around 2017. By 2022, we completely migrated onto cloud. That means we do not have any more data centers. It's something that is very unique in CPG industry because many companies probably started the cloud journey, but often it gets lost. It could get easily lost once you reach probably that 50-60%. The key differences in our approach first is work on change management, ensuring that the leadership is behind the cloud strategy, understanding what truly cloud means, what are the disruption that it will create, what are the opportunities. So we got buy-in from the leadership. We worked both bottom-up and top-down in terms of ensuring that the cloud strategy is embedded into our business plan. We partnered with right partners. Of course, AWS. AWS is our infrastructure as a service partner at that time. Now, AWS is a key partner in our ecosystem. But more importantly, the extended ecosystem, like of your SIs, so thanks to Wipro and Mindtree, Infosys, all of these partners actually played a key role in this success. And you have to really take your people through it. So I think over a period of 5 years, we migrated 2,500 plus servers, but more importantly, 1,000 plus applications. While doing it so, we started actually reducing our technical debt. That's more important. So towards the end of that 5 years, we came from 1,000 application footprint to more like a 600 application footprint. It's all about the people that actually make the difference. So making sure that your internal IT teams are completely bought into it, they have the appropriate skill and the background, and taking them through the journey is the most important thing because technology is there everywhere. The next important thing I want to call out as a building block for our success towards spin and the digital transformation is addressing single points of failure. As you can imagine, a company like Kellogg at that time, or Kellanova with 117 years experience or background, means you ought to have a lot of technical debt or single point of failure. So what we have done is, along with cloud, we actually started focusing on our SD-WAN journey, cyber journey, various other key enabling journeys as part of it. And we have completely removed the single point of failures, both from a technical infrastructure perspective, but also from a people and a capability perspective as well. Another big thing that I want to call out, which is a key enabler for our spin or various other large-scale transformations, is focusing on capability building. Technology is everywhere. So starting from 2016, 17, technology is pretty much everywhere. But it's the people that makes the difference. And we have heavily focused on skill capability building. We call it as a YODA, year of development always. So we ensure that all of our technology teams across the globe have a clear understanding what could be the path from a career perspective. How can they improve their technical skills, soft skills? How can they create their sort of career mapping in the organization? How do you attract external talent? So this is something that we have heavily focused on in the last few years. We also actually created new Center of Excellencies as part of this journey. While doing this, another three big things that I want to call out, these are probably something, some of them are my favorites, Work Smart program, Curiosity Clinic, and GenAI or AI Council. So let me start with the Work Smart program. So in terms of AI and digital, it's heavily changing day in, day out. The most important thing in this sort of space is how do you really take your organization through it? Because it's not just technology that you can actually just enforce it or put it into the organization. When you have an organization like Kellogg or a Kellanova with 20,000 plus people, taking them through the journey. So WorkSmart is our collaboration initiative, wherein which we created these 500 sort of WorkSmart champions who are embedded in the business, whose entire focus is how do you efficiently work with the new technology. Call it as a Microsoft Teams or SharePoint or any other new technologies that are coming through. How do you ensure that you get most value from it? How do you make sure that it will add an advantage from your culture perspective? How can it actually amplify your culture rather than just giving them a desktop or pushing actually another technology as an upgrade? The other one that is, again, my favorite is the Curiosity Clinic. So this is something that we started probably 18 months back when this whole GenAI started erupting across the industry. So we believed actually for our members, for our teams across the globe to get best out of generative AI, the focus needs to be more of improving the curiosity muscle. That's how we named it as a Curiosity Clinics. Over the period of last 18 months, more than 6,000 people have gone through the Curiosity Clinics in which they understood how do you really effectively use generative AI? What is prompt engineering? How can it make difference in your day in, day out? Then finally, I'll probably call out the AI Council that we have established. So I think 2 years back, if you asked AI, it was pretty much across in the Kellogg and Kellanova business, across the business. So it was well embedded. We have actually super users, power users pretty much using AI. It was much more of a BAU. But ever since when generative AI came into the picture, there was a lot more focus about how do we ensure that we bring it into the company in a responsible way. It's important with the evolution of AI and Gen AI, you bring the privacy and ethics into the forefront. That's why we have established the Gen AI Council, or AI Council now, what we call it, with a very clear framework and take every initiative that gets into Kellanova through a structured process so that we keep people and our consumers safe. So in terms of the summary, like any other large-scale transformation, Spin also is a major transformation. What started as probably a 25-member team that Bill and I started probably during the initial day ended up more like a 500 people working across the globe. It took a little over 15 months in terms of bringing the design, SIT, UAT, and we had two key milestones. One was called Company in Company. This is almost like your dress rehearsal back in July 2023. And the big day, October 2nd, 2023, when we have actually spun off into two separate companies and listed in the Wall Street. Here is the summary, what happened. So more than 300 applications have been updated or separated as part of the spin. I'll probably call more than 5,000 test cases. So the testing has been a phenomenal effort as part of the spin. It was a 24/7 using some of the latest and advanced features of automation. Some of the other numbers are here, but the biggest sort of kudos that we got, both from our business and our customers, was there was zero business disruption. So much so that our consumers, some of our consumers our big customers were little concerned of such a big change, 116 years plus company spinning into two. There could be some business disruption, but zero disruption. And our CEO still probably mentioned this. He got few calls from some of the big customers, how seamless it was and how delighted they are in terms of dealing with two separate companies on the day one. I'll say all this could have happened only because of the phenomenal effort of our extended teams across the globe. Some of them are in this room, and some of them are actually on this dialed online. It's phenomenal people effort. These are some of the great pictures and memories. I'll probably now set the context and invite my ex-colleague and friend for life, Bill Rex.
Thanks, ex-colleague. No, in all seriousness, so just a quick introduction. I'm Bill Rex. I have the honor of leading WK Kellogg as a CIO. Previously, I was the CIO for North America of Kellogg, and so I was there since the end of the 2019, excuse me. I think one of the ways I want to approach this discussion is I look at it as three phases. The phases that Ramesh talked about, the cloud, where we've taken the journey, but then getting us to 2022, where we did a massive lift of basically moving a large on-premise data center to the cloud, and we did one of the largest SAP migrations to AWS. I think it was, Alex, keep me honest, number 9, 8. And that really was the enabler where, we come to now, October 2nd and October 3rd. So October 3rd, I had the honor to go ring the opening bell on Wall Street with the WK Kellogg team. It really started the journey, right? And so pre-October 2023, we had a massive uplift of what we had to do. So I look at that as really phase 1, and I'm going to get a little bit more into the details. After that, I'm looking next to February of next year, which is really what I call day 2, which is really the next storyline. After that, then, is really where the cool things happen, and that's really where we've been able to leverage a lot of the technology with AWS and enable a lot of interesting things with AI, analytics, machine learning, and really trying to enhance our business through new capabilities in the cloud. But everybody know my good friend Tony. One of the things that I really want to emphasize here is, as a leadership team, when we started, the journey, it all begins with people. And so what we wanted to do was figure out a way to, basically outline us as an organization. And we always go back to say, hey, what's in Tony's mind? And we always bring it back to our purpose, our mission, what we do, our priorities, and our strategies. And so this is something that we have everywhere, which really brings people back to, hey, what are we focused on right now? Because a lot of good work has gone into separating the company, but a lot of that has to come back to how do we start to think about enabling our people, but also driving focus. The one point I want to talk about is the bottom left under our priorities, so launch an independent company. And so you see something there called TSA exits. And really, I'm not sure if everybody's been part of a separation, but the way it usually goes down is you figure out how do we separate the company to continue to run the business, but then have something called a transitional service agreement, which allows you to continue to run. There's all sorts of ways you can skin the cat, and I think we had the opportunity of saying, all right, let's be very smart and pragmatic about it. We know that we need to get to October. Well, what's real and what can we actually do in that time period, and then focus post-October running TSAs, and then as I mentioned, post day 2, what can AWS help us do? So to that point, we stepped back and we said, all right, let's think about how do we know the separation? You think about, the way I look at it is all these products, pre-October our sales force would go and have all these to sell, okay? Our warehouses were all, you walk down the aisle and you'd see all the same products, very complicated. And so you can see the first thing we wanted to do was say, how do we separate our network, okay? Well, we have large distribution centers, a lot of automation. That was our first work stream. And we actually now, we have 13 that we were targeting for WK Kellogg. I think we just completed our 9th one last weekend. But that's all building in AWS, and it's all turning up capacity in AWS. Next one, the next two are more like organizationally. How do we structure order delivery? How do we structure real estate? But then below the line is really where we start to get kind of technical. We start talking about, hey, what, SAP and integrated apps, which I call actually SAP and friends. So you think about SAP, I'm assuming a lot of folks in here use SAP, but there's a lot of things that have to be connected to it to make it work. And then finally, we have a couple other points below it, marketing data technology, so MarTech and data analytics. And those are really things that we're focusing on, what I would call that post day 2 going into day 3, which are really where we're driving a transformation agenda. Now, the big part about this then comes to the journey. And, you start at the bottom and we go all the way up of how we want to look at this. And really it started back about a year and a half ago of planning. I mean, to get this done required a significant amount of planning, but then driving, gives and takes, like I mentioned before. Like, what are the things we actually want to focus on, and what are the things that we can do now, and what are things we want to do post? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that day 1 scope looks like. But I can't emphasize enough the point that Ramesh talked about earlier with us moving and migrating our entire data center to AWS. That allows us to be data centerless. It allows us to ramp up capacity. It allows us to ramp up all the technology we need on a click of a button. And what that now is giving us the opportunity to do is focus the business in the right directions on, hey, what is important and what are the things that we can do to leverage capacity, but making sure that as we cut over all these systems from Kellanova to WK, it's a significant effort, and it's one of those things where we've been at it for about 10 months now. We basically have created multiple data centers in AWS, and we're running a $3 billion business in AWS, which is significant. Now, I talk about day 1, right? And so this is, just to put the button on it, day 1 is October. That's when we rang the opening bell and we separated the company. Well, what did we want to do to get there? And so we really looked at kind of 3 pockets of work: foundations, applications, and data analytics. Now, foundations is really where we focused. Much of the effort to get us to day 1 was, how do we create and separate our own network? How do we build our collaboration platforms out? How do we build our security platforms as well? And how do we make sure that we start to think about how do we drive the separation of all the plants? Applications, we made some smart decisions. The one thing that we did was we said, hey, we really want to focus on building our first HR system in our own environment pre-day 1. What that meant for us is that we didn't have to depend on Kellanova to drive payroll, run our employee records and things like that. So we made some very smart decisions. And the other thing that we did was we said, hey, we can run SAP, but let's logically separate SAP and its friends so we can continue to operate in the Kellanova system, but it lets us have time to run on the TSA until we actually can build and migrate that over to day 2. And then data analytics is one of the areas where I really love to focus on this space, because I remember going back and saying, everybody wants a report, and I'm like, well, let's talk about the reality of reporting. And the one point of application rationalization, report rationalization, I'm not going to throw the question out there, but let's just say when we looked at our environment, we had something like 4,800 reports. And so I said, all right, well, how many are we actually using? We started dissecting it, and we're using about 150. And so we were very focused then to say, okay, well, let's focus on getting us to day 2, but then say, what's our strategy post day 2 to start to build an AI platform on AWS, start to use some of the new technology and tools, which we're going to talk about for day 3. But what does that mean from a rationalization perspective? So I'm going to quickly go through the foundations. Again, these are the things behind the scenes a lot of people take for granted, but they're the things that really make our business run. Like, you think we built our integration platform in AWS, done. We're taking EDI in AWS now, done. All those core things that are foundational, but then the other areas of, if we're going to TSA this, we need to actually have the security measures in place to do AVD, so you can remote desktop into the Kellanova systems to run the business. And then the one thing that there was a lot of contention about was just email. Lots of data, like what are the rules, lots of drama, lots of emotion. But we got through it, and I think we came to a very good place for all parties. And then kind of the Microsoft side of the house. I won't get too deep in that just with the audience, but we use Microsoft for SharePoint and all the collaboration tools for Teams. Laptops, desktop, and then we set up our called our Center of Excellence for Support and Sustainment. Now, that's getting us to day 2, or day 1, now getting us to day 2. And really one of the things that we focused on was, how do we step back and look at the longer term value of what we're doing? And how do we, not go back to the way that we used to operate in a lot of ways? And how do we think about building, kind of back to that Tony's head? Like, how do we start to think about, how do we want Tony's head to build that within our people so they understand, how do we drive accountability in the organization, but also how do we start to prioritize what's possible, and cleaning up our applications and getting us more streamlined. So, getting us to day 3 now, post day 2 and then day 3. We have a couple areas which, we had the pleasure, and we talk about the previous slide where, we started in 1906. Our mantra was, we're now a 117-year-old startup. Well, how do you drive that? How do you drive that type of attitude and mentality to say, hey, we're a startup, very different ways of thinking, but how do you start to drive that mentality back into the organization so they think differently about what we're investing? Because we're a smaller company, we're still a $3 billion company, but we also have the ability to drive a different agenda. And so one of the things we started with is architecting our platform in AWS or data analytics. We made some investments in Snowflake, but we also have a lot of the integration, the ingestion, and really the way I look at it is, this is the foundational way that we want to get our platforms in the right way. We have data that's going to come in. We need to make sure the data is reliable, it's structured, it's cataloged. And when people want to go talk about, hey, how do I start to think about AI? Well, what does that mean for sharing data in the middle? And how do we bring it back to that? So really the ingestion in, using all the AWS technology, storing it, and then the consumption of it on the right side of this chart. We also shifted kind of back to the application rationalization. One of the other big things that we focused in on was bringing Power BI into the user's hands to drive the ability to query data, but also think about the connectivity back into the platform in the cloud. The other thing, which is very important, I'm not sure if there's a lot of folks in here that know disaster recovery, but just stability of running an IT operation, building and being able to replicate East Coast to West Coast with disaster recovery. This is something that is extremely important, and AWS provided that opportunity for us to leverage both coasts, resiliency, and also being able to work with our co-located environments. So, why are we doing this? And this is one of the things where we step back, and I have a retro mini wheat up there who's trying to push it into a different way of saying, hey, let's think differently about data analytics. But how do we think about preparing, acting, and behaving in the right way? And then getting us to a point of kind of back to that chart. How do we ingest it? How do we analyze it? How do we look at the way of driving BI back into the organization, but also driving analytics? So, foundational, disaster recovery, infrastructure. Now, closing this out, this is really, I love this slide because it talks about in one page what we've talked about this entire deck. Really the bottom piece of the foundation. So really thinking about all the different technology we've put in place, how do we start to drive that? How do we start to drive that back into the business so they understand that the foundation that we have there, we're a big SAP shop, we have a lot of external data we bring in, we pull it through, and then we're using all the Gen AI technology next. Those are really the things with, I'm not sure how many people have been looking at the Q, the Bedrock, but those are the areas that we're starting to drive the benefits back in our organization. And what we're seeing what we're seeing with the early findings, and again, this is post day 2, so we're really testing the waters now, but we've laid a foundation here. We're now looking at how do we drive the right leadership in our organization, so sales, marketing, supply chain. How do we start to have those discussions and say, okay, well, what are some of the repetitive things you do when you go into a store? What are the things that you think you would want your sales force to do better? Well, let's talk about where that data sits and how do we start to drive automation back into it. So we are starting to see some things and we're scratching the surface. But that's why I really believe when I start going through day 1 to day 2, post day 2 to day 3, we're building the foundation that would not be attainable without using AWS. So with that, thank you. And I love to always say this, and I'm the guy that's standing between you and the bar. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.